It is just past 7 in the evening over Bass Strait, and a 20-year-old pilot named Frederick Valentich keys his microphone. What the recording captures next has been argued about for nearly half a century. 17 seconds of metallic, scraping noise, then silence. No wreckage, no body, no explanation that has ever fully held up. The tape still exists. The official transcript still exists. The man does not. Some disappearances are worse because they leave something behind. A final log entry, a radio tuned to a frequency nobody heard, or 6 words spoken in a calm voice to an air traffic controller who had no idea they were a goodbye. These are 4 cases where the record stops before the story does. None of them have ever been solved, and in each one, somewhere near the end, there is a moment you cannot get past, no matter how long you think about it. On Boxing Day in 1900, the lighthouse tender Hesperus finally reaches a wedge of black rock about 20 miles off the western coast of Scotland. The captain, James Harvey, has been trying to get here since the 20th of December. Weather kept him away for 6 days. Now he is close enough to see the lighthouse station on Island Moor, the largest of the 7 hunters, a chain of small islands the Hebrideans have always treated as strange ground. There is no flag on the flagpole, no provision boxes on the landing, no sign of life anywhere on the rock. Harvey sounds the whistle. He fires a signal rocket into the afternoon sky. Nothing moves. The relief keeper, Joseph Moore, is rowed to the east landing and climbs the cliff path alone, about 148 feet of basalt between him and the keeper's quarters. The compound gate is closed, the main door is closed, the kitchen door is open, the fire is cold, the beds are unmade, the clock on the wall has stopped because nobody has been there to wind it. 3 men live here. James Duckett, the principal keeper, 44 years old, married with 4 children. Thomas Marshall, his second assistant in his late 20s, and Donald MacArthur, an experienced sailor filling in for a sick colleague. They have not been heard from in 11 days. There is no body on the island, no missing boat, no note, no message of any kind. First, kill the famous version of this story. You have probably heard it. Thomas Marshall's logbook, where he writes that the storm was fiercer than anything he had seen in 20 years at sea, that the 3 of them prayed together, that the final entry reads, "Storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all." That version is not real. It came from later retellings, a pulp magazine story, a poem, a book that reprinted the fiction as fact. Joseph Moore said the kitchen was tidy. The real logbook ends with a routine weather entry. The last documented mark of any kind is chalk barometer readings on a slate at 9 in the morning. No drama, just numbers. What is actually left behind is this: 2 oilskins and a pair of sea boots, gone from their pegs inside the lighthouse. 1 coat still hanging where its owner left it. And the West Landing. The West Landing is where the case changes. A heavy wooden storage box wedged into a crevice, 110 feet above sea level, is gone. The ropes from inside it are scattered across the rocks below. Iron railings around the crane platform have been ripped from the concrete and twisted. The stone handrail at the landing has been carried away entirely. A block of stone weighing over a ton has been dragged down the cliff path. Turf stripped from the cliff top more than 200 feet above the water. A lifebuoy lashed to the railing at first looks like someone grabbed it, until you notice the ropes are still intact and scraps of canvas are still stuck to them. The sea tore it free on its own. Robert Muirhead, the superintendent of the Northern Lighthouse Board, arrives on the 29th of December and spends days piecing it together. His official report concludes that Duckett and Marshall went down to the West Landing to secure that wooden box against worsening weather. He deduces this from the missing oilskins. MacArthur, watching from the lighthouse, saw a wave coming and ran out without his coat to warn them. All 3 were swept from the rocks. The cause of death in the parish register, probably drowning, and honestly, the wave theory is probably right. The sea around Island Moor does things that sound impossible until you look at the evidence. A later keeper, Walter Oldebert, photographed spray reaching the lamp room 100 meters above the sea during a 1950s storm. He was nearly washed off the island himself once, by water rolling over the crest at more than 70 meters above the waterline. Rogue waves are real. That was established scientifically only in 1995, when a monitoring buoy in the North Sea recorded an 84-foot wall of water in conditions that should not have produced it, on a cliff like the western face of Island Moor, which ends in a narrow sea cave. Water can pressurize and explode upward with almost no warning. So yes, the ocean could have taken all three of them. It has taken people from worse positions on safer coasts. But then there's the coat. Muirhead's explanation for why MacArthur's coat is still hanging is that he ran out in a hurry. But think about what that requires. MacArthur is a veteran sailor, a man who has spent his life on open water. You do not sprint out of a lighthouse into a December storm on the Atlantic without pausing for your coat unless you have no time at all, unless the wave was already there when he looked. Which means whatever he saw it, and was gone in seconds. 3 men, 110 feet of rope box, smashed loose from the cliff, 1 coat on a peg. The slate said 9 in the morning. After that, nothing. That case is unsettling because it ends so cleanly. 3 men gone, and the only record is a number scratched in chalk. The next case is unsettling for the opposite reason. There are clues everywhere. None of them lead anywhere. On the 3rd of October 1955, a motor vessel called the Joyita is preparing to leave Apia Harbour in Western Samoa. Her captain is a 41-year-old British mariner named Thomas Henry Miller, known throughout the South Pacific simply as Dusty. He's been awake all night trying to fix the port engine. He has not fixed it. The voyage to the Tokelau Islands is 270 miles, and this cargo run is the thing keeping his finances together, so he has decided to sail anyway. There are 25 people on board, passengers, crew, a doctor traveling to perform a surgical amputation on a patient waiting for him, a pharmacist, a district officer, 2 Tokelauans going home for a holiday with their 3-year-old daughter. The ship is due at Whakaofo on the 5th of October. She does not arrive. By the 6th, search aircraft are in the air. Over the following 6 days, they cover roughly 100,000 square miles of ocean. The largest air-sea search mounted in the region up to that point. No debris, no oil slick, no bodies. On the 12th, the search is called off, and then, 5 weeks later, a merchant ship crossing toward Funafuti spots something just after dawn. A vessel sitting very low in the water, listing so far to port that her deck rail is dipping into the sea. The flying bridge is smashed, the windows are broken, nobody is on deck or answering hails. It is the Joyita. She is more than 600 miles west of where she should be, entirely alone. Here is what investigators find aboard. All 4 flotation craft gone, the dinghy and all 3 life rafts, the logbook gone, the sextant and chronometer gone, Miller's firearms gone, the cash gone, about 4 tons of cargo gone. On deck, the doctor's bag. Inside it, a stethoscope, a scalpel, and 4 lengths of blood-soaked bandaging. The clocks wired to the ship's generator have all stopped at 25 minutes past 10. Every light switch in every cabin is in the on position. Whatever happened, happened at night. The radio is tuned to the International Marine Distress frequency, but the antenna lead had been broken before departure and painted over so neatly that nobody noticed it. Even if someone sat at that radio and called for help, nobody within range would have heard a word. And this is where the story should make sense. It doesn't. The physical failure probably started below deck. A corroded pipe in the engine room gave way, seawater poured in, and the pumps could not keep up. The flooding explains the darkness, the stopped clocks, the listing hull. It does not explain why 25 people got into rafts, because here is the part of this story that nobody has ever gotten past. The Joyita could not sink. Her holds had been packed with nearly 640 cubic feet of cork. 80 empty oil drums added more buoyancy on top of that. When investigators eventually pumped her out in Suva, she floated perfectly and was towed away without difficulty. The chief surveyor of ships for the New Zealand Marine Department stated for the record that the Joyita would have continued to float indefinitely in the condition she was found in. The harbour master at Suva said he could not understand why anyone would have abandoned her. Someone was injured badly enough to need 4 lengths of bandaging in the middle of the night on a flooding ship with no working lights. The official inquiry of 1956 barely mentions the bandages. Its conclusion on what happened to the 25 people is a single word: inexplicable. As of 2012, only 6 of them had ever been formally declared dead. There is a version of what happened on the Joyita that requires a chain of panicked decisions made by frightened people in the dark on a ship that was listing further every hour. And that theory is probably right, and somehow it is still not enough. The next case has a theory too, a very good one in fact, and the same problem. On the 21st of October 1978, a young pilot named Frederick Valentich files a flight plan from Moorabbin Airport on the southern edge of Melbourne to King Island, about 150 miles south across Bass Strait. He is 20 years old. He has told the airport staff he is picking up friends. He told other people he is collecting crayfish. Both are untrue. Nobody at King Island is expecting him. What Valentich has not told anyone is that 3 months earlier, he failed 3 of the 5 written examinations for his commercial pilot's license. On his 3rd attempt, he has been telling his family he is 1 subject away from his commercial rating. That is not true. He has twice been caught flying into cloud without the instrument authorization to do so. There is a regulatory investigation being considered against him. His father will later describe him as deeply fascinated by unidentified flying objects. He keeps a folder of newspaper clippings on the subject. 6 days before this flight, he tells his girlfriend that if a UFO landed in front of them right now, he would get in it. At just after 7 o'clock, he reports passing Cape Otway, on schedule. 6 minutes later, he calls Melbourne Flight Service. The controller on duty is Steve Roby. What follows is recorded in the official accident report, and the entire exchange, from Valentich's first call to the moment the recording goes silent, lasts 6 minutes and 14 seconds. He reports a large aircraft below 5,000 feet. 4 bright lights. Looks like landing lights. Robbie checks, and there is no known traffic. A minute later, Valentich says the aircraft has just passed over him, at least 1,000 feet above, at a speed he cannot identify. He asks if there is any Air Force aircraft in the vicinity. There is not. It seems to me that he's playing some sort of game, Valentich says. He's flying over me 2-3 times at speeds I could not identify. Then, at 27 seconds past the 7-minute mark, Valentich transmits the line that everyone who has studied this case remembers. Melbourne, Delta Sierra Juliet. It's not an aircraft, it is. And the microphone stays open for 2 seconds with nothing said. Roby asks him to describe it. Valentich says, as it's flying past, it's a long shape. Such speed, it is before me right now, Melbourne. Then, it seems like it's stationary. What I'm doing right now is orbiting, and the thing is just orbiting on top of me also. It's got a green light, and sort of metallic. Like, it's all shiny on the outside. There is an explanation for this, and it's a good one. There is a well-documented condition in night flying called spatial disorientation, where a pilot loses track of the horizon and begins to bank without realizing it. The bank tightens into a descending spiral that feels like level flight. Bright planets seen through the windscreen appear to move in erratic ways. The G-loading of a tightening turn can starve a Cessna's engine of fuel, which would explain the rough idling Valentich reports a few minutes later. It is a coherent theory, but the recording doesn't behave the way it should. 46 seconds after that description, the object vanishes. Then it reappears. Then Valentich's voice changes. Delta Sierra Juliet. The engine is rough idling. I've got it set at 2324, and the thing is coughing. Then, one final time, Melbourne. That strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. 2 seconds of open microphone. It is hovering, and it's not an aircraft. At 12 minutes and 28 seconds past 7, Valentich keys his microphone a final time. Delta Sierra Juliet, Melbourne. And then, for 17 seconds, the only thing on the recording is what the official report describes as a metallic scraping noise. Then the carrier signal cuts off. The search begins 21 minutes later. Calm seas, good visibility, light winds. A Royal Australian Air Force search aircraft is dispatched. 8 civilian planes join, and they find nothing. No wreckage, no oil slick, no emergency beacon, no life jackets, nothing. The search is called off 4 days later. In May of 1983, a piece of metal washes up on a beach on Flinders Island, about 200 miles from the last known position. It may be from Valentich's aircraft. The investigators could not confirm it either way. The official conclusion on what happened is 7 words. The reason for the disappearance of the aircraft has not been determined. Robey has been asked about that recording more times than he can count. Across more than 4 decades, he says the same thing every time. Valentich did not sound like a man about to crash. He sounded genuinely frightened of something he could not explain. The original master tape was returned to standard service after the investigation and recorded over. What exists today is a copy of a copy of a copy. Whatever was on that tape, the clearest version of it is gone. 3 cases so far. A lighthouse, a ship, a Cessna. Each one leaves something behind, and that something is just enough to make it worse. The last case on this list is in a different category entirely. It is the most documented aviation disappearance in history. Hundreds of investigators, hundreds of millions of dollars spent searching, and after all of it, the same place every other case ends up. A silence that does not have a bottom. On the night of the 7th of March 2014, a Boeing 777 lifts off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport and turns northeast toward Beijing. Its captain is 53-year-old Sahari Ahmad Shah, with more than 18,000 hours of flight time, more than 8,000 of them on this aircraft type. His first officer, Fariq Abdul Hamid, is 27. 239 people are on board. The flight is Malaysia Airlines 370. At 19 minutes past 1 in the morning, the controller at Kuala Lumpur passes the routine handoff. Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. 4 seconds later, the cockpit replies, "Good night, Malaysian 370, calm, routine, completely indistinguishable from 1,000 other sign-offs on the same route." And that is the last thing anyone on the ground ever hears from that aircraft. At 20 minutes past 1, the aircraft reaches a waypoint over the South China Sea, and the transponder goes off. Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, and Ho Chi Minh all lose the flight simultaneously. Then the aircraft makes a sharp left turn and heads back the way it came. What most people do not know is that Malaysian military radar tracked it the entire way back. The operators watching that screen did not alert anyone. The Rescue Coordination Center was not activated until 5:30 in the morning, more than 4 hours after the transponder went dark. By then, the aircraft had been flying for hours in a direction nobody was looking. It crosses back over the Malaysian peninsula, turns northwest up the Strait of Malacca, and then somewhere over the Andaman Sea, it leaves radar range entirely. At that point, even the military cannot see it. But there is one system still receiving a signal. A Boeing 777 maintains a passive connection with a satellite, even when no one on board is actively using it. About once an hour, the satellite sends an automated ping, and the aircraft replies. Engineers at Inmarsat in London spent weeks reanalyzing every one of those pings, and what they found pointed south, deep into the southern Indian Ocean, as far from land as it is possible to get. The aircraft pings the satellite 7 times after the transponder goes off. The 7th ping, just after 8 in the morning, lasts only 8 seconds. That duration is consistent with the engines flaming out from fuel exhaustion, the aircraft briefly rebooting its systems on auxiliary power, then going dark as the last fuel burns off. The frequency data from the final 2 pings indicates an aircraft in an increasing, accelerating descent. The implied rate goes from roughly 3,900 feet per minute to nearly 15,000. It is falling fast and getting faster. That 7th ping draws a curved line across the southern Indian Ocean, about 1,500 miles west of Perth, Australia. Somewhere along that line, on a seabed that in places is more than 4,000 meters deep, in some of the most remote water on the planet, is where investigators believe 370 most likely ended. The subsequent search is the largest in aviation history. More than 120,000 square kilometers of seafloor scanned, hundreds of millions of dollars spent, and then a second search by a private company on a no-find, no-fee contract. Neither found the aircraft. Debris does wash ashore, more than 30 pieces eventually, from coastlines across Réunion, Mozambique, Madagascar, Tanzania, and South Africa. Many are matched conclusively to 9M-MRO, by part numbers and paint codes. Analysis of a recovered wing component shows it was in the retracted position when it separated, not configured for a water landing. The aircraft hit the surface hard and at high speed. The official investigation report, 495 pages, concluded that the flight path changes after the transponder went off were more likely than not the result of deliberate manipulation by someone in the cockpit. It made no determination of who. The lead investigator at the press conference said, in plain language, that they were publishing the report only because an investigation requires a formal conclusion. The captain's home flight simulator, analyzed by the FBI, contained 7 saved data points from a single simulation session conducted in the weeks before the disappearance. The reconstructed path ran from Kuala Lumpur, northwest up the Strait of Malacca, then south into the Indian Ocean, ending with fuel exhaustion. The investigation report stated that nothing of forensic significance was found on the simulator. Both of those statements, that the path existed and that it was not considered forensically significant, are on the record. They have never been publicly reconciled. The cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder are somewhere on the floor of the southern Indian Ocean. Unless the wreckage is found, they stay there, and the wreckage has not been found. In March of 2025, a new contract sent another search vessel to a different section of the priority area. The vessel departed in January of 2026. On the 8th of March 2026, the 12th anniversary of the disappearance, the company announced that no wreckage had been located. These 4 cases are not connected by one explanation. A wave on a Scottish cliff is not a corroded pipe. A corroded pipe is not a graveyard spiral. A graveyard spiral is not a disabled transponder. What they share is not a cause. What they share is a shape. Someone on the other end was waiting. Robbie waited for Valentich to check in with King Island and never heard it. The controller at Ho Chi Minh waited for the handoff from Malaysian 370 that never arrived. The Hesperus blew its horn into a Boxing Day silence and waited for someone to raise a flag on that rock. The radio at Fakaupo called for the Joyita on the 6th of October and waited for a reply from a ship whose antenna was broken before it ever left port. A chalk slate marked at 9 in the morning, 2 oilskins gone, 1 coat left behind. A radio tuned to a distress frequency that nobody could hear, and blood on bandages, and 25 people who climbed off an unsinkable ship and were never seen again. 17 seconds of scraping noise over a strait that was searched and found empty. 6 words in a calm voice, and then a satellite counting down 7 pings to something it had no way to understand. The records are still there. They stop where they stop, and whatever came next never made it back.